जय जय राम ओम श्री राम जय राम 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 जय जय राम ओम
Shri Ram Jai Ram Jai Jai Ram Shri Ram Jai Ram Jai Jai Ram Shri Ram Jai Ram Jai Jai Ram Shri Ram Jai Ram Jai Jai Om Shri Ram Jai Ram Jai Jai Ram 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 Om Shri Ram Jai Ram Jai Jai Ram Shri Ram Jai Ram Jai Jai Ram Shri Ram Jai Ram Jai Jai Ram Om 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 Shri Ram Jai Ram Jai Jai Ram Shri Ram Jai Ram Jai Jai Ram Om Shri Ram Jai Ram Jai Jai Ram Om Shri Ram Jai Ram Jai Jai Ram Om Shri Ram Jai Ram Jai Jai Ram Shri Ram Jai Ram Jai Jai Ram Om Shri Ram Jai Ram Jai Jai Ram Om Shri Ram Jai Ram Jai Jai Ram Om Shri Ram Jai Ram Jai Jai Ram Shri Ram Jai Ram Jai Jai Ram Om Shri Ram Jai Ram Jai Jai Ram Shri Ram Jai Ram Jai Jai Ram Om Shri Ram Jai Ram Jai Jai Ram Shri Ram Jai Ram Jai Jai Ram Om Shri Ram Jai Ram Jai Jai Ram Om Shri Ram Jai Ram Jai Jai Ram Om Shri Ram Jai Ram Jai Jai Ram Shri Ram Jai Ram Jai Jai Ram Om Shri Ram Jai Ram Jai Jai Ram 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 Om Shri Ram Jai Ram Jai Jai Ram 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 Om Shri Ram Jai Ram Jai Jai Ram Shri Ram Jai Ram Jai Jai Ram Shri Ram Jai Ram Jai Jai Ram Shri Ram Jai Ram Om Shri Ram Jai Ram Jai Jai Ram Shri Ram Jai Ram Jai Jai Ram Shri Ram Jai Ram Jai Jai Shri Ram Jai Ram Jai Jai Ram Om Shri Ram Jai Ram Jai Jai Ram Om Shri Ram Jai Ram Jai Jai Ram Shri Ram Jai Ram Jai Jai Ram Om Shri Ram Jai Ram Jai Jai Ram 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 Om Shri Ram Jai Ram Jai Jai Ram 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 Om Shri Ram Jai Ram Jai Jai Ram Shri Ram Jai Ram Jai Jai Ram Om Shri Ram Jai Ram Jai Jai Ram Om Shri Ram Jai Ram Jai Jai Ram Om Shri Ram Jai Ram Jai Jai Ram 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 Om Shri Ram Jai Ram Jai Jai Ram Shri Ram Jai Ram Jai Jai Ram Om Shri Ram Jai Ram Jai Jai Ram Shri Ram Jai Ram Jai Jai Ram Om Shri Ram Jai Ram Jai Jai Ram 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 Om Shri Ram Jai Ram Jai Jai Ram Om Shri Ram Jai Ram Jai Jai Ram Om Shri Ram Jai Ram Jai Jai Ram Shri Ram Jai Ram Jai Jai Ram Om Shri Ram Jai Ram Jai Jai Ram 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 Om Shri Ram Jai Ram Jai Jai Ram 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 Om Shri Ram Jai Ram Jai Jai Ram Shri Ram Jai Ram Jai Jai Ram Om Shri Ram Jai Ram Jai Jai Ram Shri Ram Jai Ram Jai Jai Ram Om Shri Ram Jai Ram Jai Jai Ram 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 Om Shri Ram Jai Ram Jai Jai Ram Shri Ram Jai Ram Jai Jai Ram Om Shri Ram Jai Ram Jai Jai Ram Shri Ram Jai Ram Jai Jai Om Shri Ram Jai Ram Jai Jai Ram. In the Mission of God, Return Journey, Part 1. God is an ocean of compassion. By this time, the rotis and dal were ready. The sadhu procured some large leaves from the shrubs outside, and packing the food in them, he called for the spare cowteen of Ramdas, and fastening the parcel with it, handed it to him, saying, "Go back to the bank of the river, eat as much as you need, and pack up the remaining food, which will serve you on your way. After you have finished, I will escort you to the edge of the river, where you will find a man with a raft. He will take you across." You can journey back by a new route along the other side of the river. Accordingly, Ramdas went to the riverside and sitting on a stone could not consume more than a quarter of a roti and a small quantity of dal with it. The rest he tied up again and prepared to start. The sadhu took him to the raft and instructed the raftman to row him across the river. Ramdas boarded the raft and the sadhu returned to his cave. The current in the river was very strong, but the raftman was equal to it. He rowed on. In midstream, he asked Ramdas what he was carrying in the parcel. Ramdas told him that it was dal and roti. Then with a bright smile he said, "I'm so hungry, I shall thank you if you will give the food to me." Ramdas needed no asking twice and no thanks. With the greatest delight, he passed on the parcel to him. Ramdas now understood that Ram wanted him to carry it for the sake of the raftman. Ramdas arrived at the other bank. As he proceeded on the sands a few steps, he found an old man chopping a fallen tree with a hatchet for making a post. Ramdas went to him. Ramdas went up to him and sat beside him. "Ramji," Ramdas asked, "will you please show Ramdas the way that leads to Swargashram?" The kindly old man stopped his work and looking up to him said, "Swargashram is far, far away. There is no beaten track or cut-out path. You have to go from stage to stage, making inquiries on the way. Darkness is already at hand, so you cannot think of starting on your long journey now. You go by the path I am showing you. A mile uphill, you will discover 2 houses surrounded by cornfields. You take refuge in one of them. The people over there will gladly give you shelter for the night. Tomorrow morning, you may start on your journey." He pointed at a thin zigzag footpath going up the hills in the midst of a dense growth of trees. He climbed up and on ascending about a mile, found himself on a vast area of green fields, the mountains rising still higher in the background. He noticed 2 small houses, about 40 yards from each other, standing in the midst of the fields. He passed through the fields towards one of them. In front of the house, there was a raised platform of wooden planks supported by 2 stout stumps of trees. He got upon it. Beside 2 lads, a middle-aged man and an old man were squatting upon it. The latter 2 were busy mending a torn blanket. When they saw him, the middle-aged man rose and producing from the house a black rug, spread it on the floor and beckoned him to sit on it. He sat down. He asked where Ramdas was coming from and whither he was bound. So he asked where Ramdas was coming from and whither he was bound. Ramdas replied that he was hailing from Vasishtashram and was on his way to Swargashram. The middle-aged man said, "You must have then met the sadhu who lives in the cave. He does not let any other sadhu stay at that place. He makes it a point to drive him away. He is harsh and cruel." Ramdas said, Externally he may appear to be harsh, but he has a soft heart. God's Leela is wonderful. He plays in various ways. The sadhu fed Ramdas with dal and roti before leaving the ashram. In many ways, he was kind and loving to him. He replied, "This is strange. We have found him far from kind and courteous. However, by the way, for the night, what shall we offer you?" After a pause of moodiness, he said, "Here I have a number of cows. pointing to a herd of cows resting in an open enclosure facing his dwelling. But I count it a misfortune that at the moment none of them is yielding milk, or I should be so happy to feed you with milk. Again, after a moment's thought, he called his son, one of the lads, and asked him to run to the neighboring house with a pot for some milk, and spread two thick blankets on a quiet cot, the only furniture in the house, and lighting up a fire in front of it, asked Ramdas to enter and occupy it. He made him lie down and began to massage his legs. He addressed Ramdas, his heart welling up with love. You are veritably Ishvara, who has come to my humble abode. I am only a miserable samsara, lost in the whirlpool of Maya. I have been crying to God to grant me peace, and He has, in answer to my prayer, come to me in your form. God is indeed the very ocean of compassion and mercy. Ramdas rejoined, Hare Ram, this is all your Leela. Ishvara is the friend of the helpless and servant of his devotees. Ramdas is only a child of God. Thou art he indeed who is deluging him with thy unbounded love. Ramdas cannot find words to express with what motherly kindness and care he tended Ramdas. His daughter, aged about 12, prepared the food, his wife being no longer in the land of the mortals. The interior of the hut was dimly lit by a log fire. The host left Ramdas and returned with a wide-mouthed cup of hot milk and a soft roti, which he minced and mixed with milk. Meanwhile, he picked up some white things from a full basket close by and offered them to Ramdas. Eat them, he said. Ramdas pressed them between his fingers and felt them soft. In the dim light, he could scarcely make out what the pieces were. Ramdas put a piece into his mouth. It was so delicious to the taste. The host, it is khan, a root that you are eating. It is boiled. We obtain it in these parts in plenty. Ramdas, Ramji, Ramdas would prefer to eat 2 more pieces of this root and must be excused regarding roti and milk. No, he lovingly remonstrated, you shall have both. You may do justice to as much khan as you like, but you ought to drink milk in which I have mixed up roti. Ramdas had to drink milk thickened with roti, as also eat some more bits of khan. Then all the inmates had their evening meal. Far into the night, the happy talk of God, bhakti, prem, and Anand went on. The host was all the while in ecstasy. After a couple of hours' sleep, Ramdas awoke in the morning and started on his journey. The host was inconsolable. With tears in his eyes, he appealed to Ramdas to stay with him a day longer. But Ram's command to Ramdas to leave the place was imperative. He gave a parting embrace to the kind host who said, you see higher up on the hills a small patch. It is a group of huts. Keeping the sign in view, walk up towards it. You might reach there at midday, and the hospitable people of the village will look to your wants. Traversing through forests and valleys, Ramdas reached the village when the sun had risen right overhead. Here too, the villagers treated him with the greatest hospitality. After meal, he set out again. The old man of the village said, Maharaj, you have yet to cover a distance of about 10 miles. There is no footpath, nor are there any villages on the way. If you venture alone, God only should be your guide. I can only show you the direction in which you have to go. Ramdas's chat with Ram. The old man pointed out with his forefinger the direction, and Ramdas tramped on. After walking about a mile, he found himself in a dense jungle, the ground being covered with dry leaves. Almost knee deep, he waded through them. He was in fact going on at random, and he was in a conversational mood. He addressed Ram, Divine Mother, it is yourself who has brought this child here to roam on these sacred hills. It is up to you to lead and guide him. As he walked on, he came upon a sloping hill. Here he discovered, at the edge of a cliff, a cave, a deep hollow in a rock. He peeped into it. It was utterly dark inside. He had heard that such caves were usually lairs of wild beasts. He thought that he had now an opportunity of getting darshan of Ram in the form of a tiger or lion. He jumped into the cave and shouted out, Hari-O, 3 times, and awaited the result. None came out of the cave. It was Ram's will that he should not come face to face with the wild beasts. He came out. There was yawning before him, a deep precipice. This had to be climbed down. Now, Ram, what do you propose? Asked Ramdas. Fear not, child, descend, was Ram's cool reply. Ramdas turned round and slowly lowered himself and began to crawl down. The chinks on the rough crag serving as foot supports and handholds, he descended. A slight slip meant a fall over 200 feet and certain destruction of the body, but there was Ram's assurance. Fear had taken leave of Ramdas once and for all. Slowly and steadily, step by step, he got down. The body of Ramdas seemed to be like an inflated rubber doll. The body of Ramdas seemed to be like an inflated rubber doll, so light and so buoyant. Breathing had automatically stopped. The fragile foot supports had at times been trembling, sending down bits of stone layers through the pressure of the foot, producing by their fall reverberating sounds at the depths of the valley below. What time it took him to reach the bottom of the ravine, he had no idea. It all appeared to be so short. He at last alighted at the base of the rock, quite safe. Here again he cried out at a high pitch, Hari-O, making the giant hills all around resound with echo. Ramdas exclaimed, Ram, how glorious you are! You have made Ramdas perform a most marvelous feat. Ram rejoined, This is not all. More feats are in store for you. Get ahead. Ramdas continued his journey in the cool shade of the titanic trees. Ramdas, O Ram, how blessed is Ramdas to be conscious of your company with him, even in this lonely place. My child, Ram assured Ramdas, you shall in future be always aware of my presence with you, in you, and everywhere about you. I grant you this knowledge based upon your perfect oneness with me. You and I are one. Ramdas, hearing this, laughed with intense joy. Half a mile was traversed. Now he came to the brink of another precipice, steeper than the previous one, but with no footholds of any kind for climbing down. It was a smooth, flat rock running vertically down. Looking at it, he giggled and said, Ram, now you are caught. Ramdas should like to know how you are tackling the problem now. Soft, instantly put in Ram. No doubt you are clever but I'm more clever than you can ever imagine. No doubt you are clever, but I'm more clever than you can ever imagine. Look to your right. There are the ground slopes down through the incline. So, though the incline is sharp and slippery, try that way. Look to your right. There are ground slopes down. Though the incline is sharp and slippery, try that way. Ramdas stepped towards it and, dancing a caper or two, laughed and spoke. Ram, you are a brick, but it won't do. You see, the slope is not only sharp, but is covered by loose earth. To put the foot on it is to slip, and Ramdas will then be rolling down like a folded mattress until he reaches the bottom. You like it, eh? Ramdas, your laugh and poses are too early. Observe Ram. Ramdas, your laugh and poses are too early. Observe Ram. You don't seem to make use of the eyes which I have given you. Look well. On the incline, you will discover stumps of dried grass at some distance from one another. These are roots of thick reeds, and being dry, they cannot be distinguished from the earth. But a close scrutiny will reveal them to you. They are strong enough to support your feet. Descend without any delay. Ram was right. Ram was right. There were roots. Ramdas, accordingly, going on all fours, crept down, having the dried stumps of grass as footrests, one after the other, until he reached nearly the end of the incline, beyond which there was again a steep chasm, the incline being no longer continuous. Until he reached nearly the end of the incline, beyond which there was again a steep chasm, the incline being no longer continuous. The situation in which he was now placed was supremely perilous. He had arrived at about 2 yards from the extreme edge of the slope, and a yard down, there was only a faint mark of a stump visible which could support no more than a toe. Having stopped here, Ramdas asked, "Now Ram, what next?" Ram was ever ready with his clues. He piped in, "Behold, child, a twig peeping out of the depths just on the edge of the slope. It is about half an inch thick. Reach it by your feet, descending a yard down by the help of the small root of grass. After that, you will know what to do next." Ramdas followed Ram's instructions and had the twig clutched in between the big toe and the other toes of his left foot like a monkey. Certainly here, Ramdas remembered Hanuman, the great devotee of Sri Ramachandra. The body was felt by Ramdas as light as a feather. With one foot thus poised on the twig, he let go the other from the grass root. For a few seconds, his whole body was balanced on one foot. Ramdas now shrank himself and, doubling up, held on to the twig with both his hands. All the time, the slender twig was oscillating to and fro most ominously. Here he looked down. The depth below was tremendous, but hurrah! Ram, you are a miracle monger. The twig on which Ramdas was resting belonged to a tall tree starting from the very base of the precipice. He descended slowly and gradually came upon the stouter branches of the tree. Now the descent became easy. The tree was a veritable giant of the forest, a tree so tall that Ramdas had never seen the like of it before. He had at last reached the bottom. Now Ram had his laugh at Ramdas's expense. Ramdas was silent. Every time he was beaten, and Ram would have the upper hand. Again Ramdas lighted upon a cave into which he entered and shouted out a loud outcry of "Hari Om!" But there was no response. Thenceforth, he had to pass through many a declivity, but easily. He was now running at full speed, frisking and dancing on the rocks. At last, he found himself again suddenly on the banks of the Ganges. Here he had to execute a small feat on the edge of a rock, projecting into the river. On the sandbank, he sped on until he reached Pulchetti. Pulchetti. In Pulchetti, there was a dharmashala managed by Punjabi sadhus. When Ramdas ran towards the building, a young sannyasi welcomed him with open arms. He actually took Ramdas in the fold of his arms and embraced him heartily as if he had met a long lost brother or child. He took Ramdas inside the dharmashala, seated him on an asan, massaged his legs for some time, and fed him sumptuously with infinite love. Ram, it is all thy doing, thou eternal love, manifest everywhere. From Pulchetti, the same evening, Ramdas walked up to Swargashram, now only a distance of 2 miles, which he reached before dark. Swargashram, Haridwar. Ramdas gives it up. When Ramdas returned to Swargashram, he directed his steps to the double kuti which he had occupied with the other 2 friends before leaving for Vasishtashram. But he found the room locked. For the night, he sought refuge in a kuti which was in ruins. This kuti consisted of nothing but 2 walls and tin sheets covering the top. The night was cold and icy blasts were blowing into the dilapidated kuti. The night passed, and the next day he still found the double kuti shut and locked. In the same line as the fallen kuti, in which Ramdas stayed for a night, there was another occupied by an old sadhu from Maharashtra. He had known Ramdas on the last occasion. He informed Ramdas that Ramcharan Das and Bhavani Shankar Rao had left Swargashram some days before, and Ramcharan Das had locked up the double kuti. He expressed his keen desire to accommodate Ramdas in his kuti. Ramdas accepted his hospitality. The room he occupied was only 10 feet by 4 feet. There was a slightly raised pad of earth along with its width, which was intended for seat and sleeping place for the single dweller. The kind sadhu insisted upon Ramdas's using the raised pad, and as for himself, the sadhu slept and sat on the lower floor at Ramdas's feet. The sadhu was a short-statured man. He was given to smoking ganja. His sadhana consisted of reading twice a day the Avadhuta Gita in Sanskrit of Sri Dattatreya. For Bhiksha, both he and Ramdas would go to the Annakshetra at midday. 1 meal a day always sufficed Ramdas. Such also was the case with the sadhu. On account of the Kumbh Mela and also the approaching pilgrimage to Badrinath and Kedarnath, there was an unusual rush of pilgrims in advance of the set periods. They would wander in Swargashram for the darshan of sadhus residing in the kutis. They used to make presents to the sadhus of eatables, clothes and money. The pious pilgrims, before turning away from the kuti after the darshan, would throw into the room their presents. Mostly they would fling pies. Every day the coins collected would amount to 10 to 12 annas. The sadhu had a jholi or a pouch in which he stored the coins. Armed with the money, the sadhu would run to the small bazaar outside the ashram and procure milk, tea, sugar and eatables. He would thus prepare tea twice a day from the proceeds of the alms. Ramdas found that the sadhu's life became one continuous round of fetching tea materials and preparing tea from morn to eve. Even his daily reads of Avadhuta Gita had to be stopped in consequence. As days passed, the coins commenced to pour in like a shower, sometimes silver coins also. Every day, there was a surplus or balance of coins after expenditure. The jewelry was getting heavier day by day, and the sadhu became madly active like a cat with a burnt tail. Ramdas now wanted to cry hot and had a frank talk on the subject of money with the sadhu. Sadhuji, God has provided us with a shelter in the kuti and is feeding us with one meal a day. He wills that we should devote all our time to his remembrance. Now, what are we doing? Tea, eatables, and meal have become the sole things of our lives. You know, sadhus have nothing to do with money. The moment you have surplus money after your creature needs are met, you think of the ways how you should spend it. You run to the bazaar for things which you can do without and get into a whirlpool of deluding activity. So in future, we shall not accept any coins from the visitors. We will pray to them not to offer any. Let us see how much we have already accumulated. The sadhu at first rebelled against the suggestion, but at last yielded when Ramdas asked him to choose between him and the money. He lowered the bag from the peg on the wall and poured out its contents. The amount was about 5 rupees, mostly in copper coins. The sadhu was, for the time being, convinced of what Ramdas told him on the question of money. What shall we do with the money? Shall we give it to some other sadhu? He asked. How can you hand over a thing to another sadhu when you have found it bad for yourself? Remarked Ramdas. Then what is to be done? He queried. The only way, said Ramdas, is to throw away the money and have done with it. At this hint, the sadhu opened his eyes wide at Ramdas in surprise. Come along, fetch the coins. Saying thus, Ramdas walked out. The sadhu blindly obeyed. Ramdas led him, both his hands full of coins, to a meshy, thorny bush which was perfectly inaccessible. Now, throw the coins into the bush, Ramdas advised. At one fling, the coins flew into the thick bush and disappeared from view. Now they both returned to the kuti. This happened in the evening. Next day, as usual, the pilgrims had again their indefatigable quest for sadhus and came in larger numbers than before. They were appealed to both by Ramdas and the sadhu not to make presents of money, but in spite of their pleading, they threw coins on the floor at the room at its entrance, as was their wont. This time not only copper coins, but also silver rupees rolled down. In the evening, they found that the collection amounted to several rupees. Ramdas gave it up. It was Ram's will, and kept quiet over the matter. The sadhu coolly, as if nothing had happened regarding the money matter, went about preparing tea and storing up provisions procured from the collections. The Kumbh Mela. The main day of the Kumbh Mela approached. It was to be on the morrow. Ramdas asked the sadhu if he had any idea of attending the festival at Haridwar. The sadhu seemed to have a great desire to be present at Haridwar the next day for the great occasion. He requested Ramdas to go with him. Ramdas also wished to see the fun. That they had good fun at the fair will be clear from what follows. They started in the afternoon. Another old sadhu, who was a permanent resident of Swargashram, also joined them. They made a halt for the night at Sat Narayan Chutti, 7 miles from Swargashram. Next day, after Bhiksha, they walked to Haridwar, where they arrived at about 5 in the evening. Both the banks of the Ganges in Haridwar presented a seething mass of humanity. For miles around, for miles all round, every nook and corner was occupied by pilgrims and sadhus. It was said that over 13 lakhs of people had assembled there for the gathering. The sadhus, however, wedged themselves between two groups of pilgrims on the opposite bank of the river. The muhurta or auspicious hour for bathing in the Brahma Kund was 4 hours after midnight. The belief goes that those who bathe in the Kund at this psychological hour will attain immortality. Ramdas did not appreciate or had he any belief in that cheap method of earning immortality. God had granted him the supreme blessing already by making him pass through the necessary struggle and sadhana. He was there to witness the magnificent mela of lakhs of people. The very sight of the vast crowds sent him into ecstasy. Till 12, the mass of humanity was lying still on the banks of the river. Now commenced a movement like the huge waves rising in the ocean. Thousands of pilgrims made a rush towards the coveted Brahma Kund. The two sadhus and Ramdas had to join the rabble. The sadhus, to prevent them being separated from each other, had their hands interlocked with one another's. The crowd had to move very slowly. Sometimes it took more than 5 minutes to cover a yard of ground. Hundreds of police were present to maintain order and to prevent accidents. On and on they went. At certain stages, the crowds halted for over half an hour. No further movement was possible on account of the march of a thick crowd from the opposite direction. Thousands of people at the back pressed on them. Thousands of people at the back pressed on them. They were crushed and squeezed as a sugarcane in the juice extracting machine. The sadhus bellowed forth. The old sadhu, who had newly joined them, was frightened out of his wits. I don't want to bathe in the kund or any such blessed thing, he cried out. I would I were out of this insufferable condition with my bones and skin whole. But there was no escape. They had bargained for the experience and they must go through it willy-nilly. The sadhu's one thought was freedom from the most uncomfortable situation in which he found himself. And he counted such freedom as nothing short of immortality itself. At last, they reached a square open place on a broad road where a number of police with the help of the long lathis used for fencing had kept at bay two onrushing crowds from opposite directions of the road. The sadhus crouched close to a sweetmeat shop on the roadside. A moment had not passed when the lathi fence gave way in one direction owing to the enormous pressure of the crowd, and what ensued was pandemonium. Cries, yells, stamping and cursing rent the air. The old sadhu, who was close to Ramdas, giving himself up for lost, gave out a piercing shriek. Ramdas was leaning against the wall of the shop, and he found two men standing on his knees, two on his shoulders, one on his neck, which bent down with the weight. All through this marvelous experience, he was perfectly calm and collected. At the time, he remembers to have his breathing entirely stopped. He sustained from heavy human bodies with ease. If he had fallen down, he would have been trampled upon to pulp. But God's protecting hand was ever on him. Ramdas now heard a piteous cry from the old sadhu. A stout mother had taken up a standing posture on his chest, and he was exhorting her, "O mother, you are my dearest mother. Please do come down from my chest. I cannot bear your weight. O mother, 1,000 dandavats at your precious feet. Please do." "I cannot do so, Sadhuji," replied the mother. "The moment I jump to the ground, I'm done for. Have patience for a while." "Oh," shouted the sadhu. "You are then..." "Oh," shouted the sadhu, "you are then bent upon killing me. Why did I come here at all? Cursed be the thought that guided me to the death trap." The tense situation lasted only for a few minutes. The police got the crowds well in hand again, and the space was cleared. Ramdas was relieved of his burdens, and so also the old sadhu. The sadhu drew a long breath of inexpressible relief as the stout lady abandoned her perch on his breast. Till the evening of the next day, they were driven hither and thither by the rushing crowds and the police, and they could not disentangle themselves from the vast and intricate human riddle. Ramdas was reminded of the perplexing fortress of the Mahabharata war. However, after the sun had gone down, they found a way out and proceeded towards Rishikesh with as much speed as they could muster. Over 100 casualties had occurred during the night's stampede and the violent onsets of the crowds. In the night, they stopped again at Sat Narayan Chuti and next day reached Swargashram. The fright and fatigue to which the old sadhu was subjected in the Mela told upon him, and he was laid up with fever and nervous debility for over a week, while Ramdas and his companion sadhu were sound as bells, not any the worse for the trying experience they had passed through. Neil can hear.
Do you want to do Rama 5 minutes?
Yeah, I can do Rama. I can stop because this chapter is over.
You have a different view, and you can start both of you.
Okay, good. Om Shri Ram Jai Ram Jai Jai Ram. Shri Ram Jai Ram Jai Jai Ram. Om Shri Ram Jai Ram Jai Jai Ram. Shri Ram Jai Ram Jai Jai Ram. Om Shri Ram Jai Ram Jai Jai Ram. Om Shri Ram Jai Ram Jai Jai Ram. Om Shri Ram Jai Ram Jai Jai Ram. Shri Ram Jai Ram Jai Jai Ram. Om Shri Ram Jai Ram Jai Jai Ram. Om Shri Ram Jai Ram Jai Jai Ram. Om Shri Ram Jai Ram Jai Jai Ram. Shri Ram Jai Ram Jai Jai Ram. Om Shri Ram Jai Ram Jai Jai Ram. 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 Om Shri Ram Jai Ram Jai Jai Ram. 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 Om Shri Ram Jai Ram Jai Jai Ram. 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 Om Shri Ram Jai Ram Jai Jai Ram. Om Shri Ram Jai Ram Jai Jai Ram. Om Shri Ram Jai Ram Jai Jai Ram. Shri Ram Jai Ram Jai Jai Ram. Om Shri Ram Jai Ram Jai Jai Ram. Shri Ram Jai Ram Jai Jai Ram. Shri Ram Jai Ram जय राम श्री राम जय राम जय 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 जय राम ओम श्री राम जय राम जय जय राम श्री राम जय राम जय जय राम ओम श्री राम जय राम जय जय राम श्री राम जय राम जय जय राम ओम श्री राम जय राम जय जय राम ओम श्री राम जय राम जय जय राम श्री राम जय राम जय जय राम श्री राम जय राम जय जय राम ओम श्री राम जय राम जय जय राम ओम श्री राम जय राम जय जय राम ओम श्री राम जय राम जय जय राम श्री राम जय राम जय जय राम ओम श्री राम जय राम जय जय राम 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 ओम श्री राम जय राम जय जय राम श्री राम जय राम जय जय राम ओम श्री राम जय राम जय जय राम श्री राम जय राम जय जय राम ओम श्री राम जय राम जय जय राम 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 ओम श्री राम जय राम जय जय राम श्री राम जय राम जय जय राम ओम श्री राम जय राम जय जय राम श्री राम जय राम जय जय राम ओम श्री राम जय राम जय जय राम 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 ओम श्री राम जय राम जय जय राम श्री राम जय राम जय जय राम ओम श्री राम जय राम जय जय राम श्री राम जय राम जय जय राम ओम श्री राम जय राम जय जय राम 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 ओम श्री राम जय राम जय जय राम ओम श्री राम जय राम जय जय राम श्री राम जय राम जय जय राम श्री राम जय राम जय जय राम ओम 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 श्री राम जय राम श्री राम जय राम जय जय राम ओम श्री राम जय राम जय जय राम ओम
श्री राम जय राम
जय जय राम ओम श्री राम जय राम जय जय राम ओम श्री राम जय राम जय जय राम ओम श्री राम जय राम जय जय राम ओम
श्री राम जय राम
जय जय राम ओम श्री राम जय राम जय जय राम ओम श्री राम जय राम जय जय राम ओम श्री राम जय राम जय जय राम ओम श्री राम जय राम
जय जय राम ओम श्री राम जय राम जय जय राम
ओम श्री राम जय राम जय जय राम ओम श्री राम जय राम जय जय राम ओम
श्री राम जय राम
जय जय राम ओम श्री राम जय राम
जय जय राम
ओम श्री राम जय राम जय जय राम ओम श्री राम जय राम जय जय राम ओम
श्री राम जय राम
जय जय राम ओम श्री राम जय राम
जय जय राम
ओम श्री राम जय राम जय जय राम ओम श्री राम जय राम जय जय राम ओम
श्री राम जय
राम जय जय राम ओम श्री राम जय राम
जय जय राम
ओम श्री राम जय राम जय जय राम ओम श्री राम जय राम जय जय राम ओम
श्री राम जय
राम जय जय राम ओम श्री राम जय राम जय जय
राम
श्री राम जय राम जय जय राम ओम श्री राम जय राम जय जय राम ओम श्री राम जय राम जय जय राम ओम श्री राम
जय राम
जय जय राम ओम श्री राम जय राम जय जय राम ओम श्री राम जय राम जय जय राम ओम
श्री राम जय राम जय जय राम ओम श्री राम जय राम जय जय
जय जय राम ओम
श्री राम जय राम
जय जय राम ओम श्री राम
जय राम जय जय राम
ओम श्री राम जय राम जय जय राम ओम श्री राम जय राम जय जय राम ओम
श्री राम जय राम जय जय राम श्री राम जय राम जय जय राम
ओम श्री राम जय राम जय जय राम ओम श्री राम जय राम जय जय राम ओम
श्री राम जय राम जय जय
राम ओम श्री राम जय राम जय जय राम ओम श्री राम जय राम जय जय राम ओम श्री राम जय राम जय जय राम ओम
श्री राम जय
राम जय जय राम ओम श्री राम जय राम जय जय राम ओम श्री राम जय राम जय जय राम ओम श्री राम जय राम जय जय राम ओम
श्री राम जय राम
जय जय राम ओम श्री राम जय राम जय जय राम ओम श्री राम जय राम जय जय राम ओम श्री राम जय राम जय जय राम ओम
श्री राम जय राम जय जय राम श्री राम जय राम जय जय राम
ओम श्री राम जय राम जय जय राम ओम श्री राम जय राम जय जय राम ओम
श्री राम
जय राम जय जय राम ओम श्री राम जय राम जय जय राम ओम श्री राम जय राम जय जय राम ओम श्री राम जय राम जय जय राम ओम श्री राम जय राम जय जय राम ओम श्री राम जय राम
जय जय राम
ओम श्री राम जय राम जय जय राम ओम श्री राम जय राम जय जय राम ओम श्री राम जय राम जय जय राम ओम श्री राम जय राम जय जय राम ओम श्री राम जय राम जय जय राम ओम श्री राम जय राम जय जय राम ओम श्री राम जय राम जय जय राम ओम श्री राम जय राम जय
जय राम
ओम श्री राम जय राम जय 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 राम जय जय राम ओम श्री राम 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 जय राम जय जय